You're listening to a
You're
small
listening
good
to-
You're
thing.
listening to a small
Small
You're
good
listening
thing.
to a small
To a small good thing.
good thing.
Small Good Thing with Steve Zell.
with Steve Zell.
Roma is the extraordinary movie made by Mexican filmmaker and Academy Award winner Alfonso Cuarón. It came out last November in 2018, but you can watch it now anytime or many times on Netflix streaming. To help me talk about it, I called my friend Greg Emilio, soon to be Dr. Emilio, in Atlanta, Georgia. He was with me on episode 107, where we talked about Patterson, another remarkable movie. I began this time by asking Greg what struck him about Roma, what stood out to him after he saw it the first time.
To me, it was very, very beautiful, especially how it's shot. It's kind of crystal clear, big black and white canvas that it's working in. So one, I just thought, dang, that was so beautiful. And two, I also felt that I had a really empathetic experience with the main character. I felt like I had gotten to know someone from a different walk of life for the few hours during the movie. So to me, it just felt like a beautiful, very human and humane movie overall.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you talk about its beauty. I wasn't sure if that was just me. But I have to say, and I was thinking this today, that I really was not so much caught up with the main character, Cleo. I mean, I was sympathetic towards her, to be sure. But I have to say that the overwhelming impact that the film had on me was its beauty. Just the incredible number of shots that kept coming and coming. Just the beauty of the thing to look at.
Yeah, it's a movie that reminds you that films are, at their core, photographs. And they're photographs that just get put in succession and causes the images to move. But this movie, frame by frame, it's just a beautiful shot, beautifully composed photograph, image after image after image.
Yeah, you've said that so well. Film is really about a series of photographs. We don't think of it that way. And these photographs that Cuarón takes are simply gorgeous to look at. And by the way, you probably know this, but Cuarón shot this film himself. I mean by that, he held the camera. Usually he works with his cinematographer. I'm sorry, I can't remember his name, but this time his cinematographer wasn't available. So Cuarón shot the entire film himself, and that means, you can't get any closer to seeing what the filmmaker wants you to see and what he wants you to look at than holding the camera himself. There's no distance between his own eyes and what you see. And I was also struck, Greg, and I know this sounds a little geeky, but I was struck by how low he keeps the camera the whole time. There are many times he is literally pointing the camera straight down. There's the famous opening shot, which is simply looking straight down on the pavers of a kind of enclosed garage. And you soon see water appearing, and it's going down the drain, and then the water gets dirty, and we hear things. The soundtrack is also very, very important, almost like he sort of left the mic on, but we still look down. There's another time the camera is looking straight down on a tabletop in the dining room while the action is going on, and we see things, all kinds of things. Often, he's running the camera, too, on a kind of a dolly at street level. All we see are the feet and shoes and legs of people. There's a shot, I remember, of Cleo and the family walking through the empty fields. Beautiful landscape shot. And then Cuarón, he gives us that wide, breathtaking landscape. But then all of a sudden, the camera's down very low and it's following a lizard running along the furrows in the dirt. And he just tracks with that lizard. And we only see the feet of Cleo then behind him.
I think it's so great that you point out that technique of the camera being low to the ground, because I think it literally makes the movie much more grounded than a typical commercial Hollywood film. It's close to the earth, and in that you feel a sense of reality. It's not so much movie. So many of our popular movies deal with fantasy. And I guess every movie is, a kind of fantasy, but this is one of those movies that is more interested in portraying the real world, the one that we human beings live in. And one of his great grounding techniques is just making the camera low and showing you like you said, that opening shot is so beautiful, where you're just looking at those paving stones and water washing over them. And it's the kind of thing, it's the kind of image that you see every day in your life, but take for granted that it's actually something kind of noteworthy, something that you should pay attention to.
Yes, you hit it. One thing I was thinking is that this film sort of helps us look at our own world, the things that make up our real life. He's so radical, you know. He just shows the inside of an automobile, a hand touching the cigarette lighter on the dashboard and the steering column, or he puts the camera on the ground, literally lays it down, and he shows us, I'm sorry to be gross about this, but he shows us dog turds. And I mean, you know, that's about as earthy as you can get.
Yeah, without a doubt. The shot of the dog poop in the garage really does stick in the memory for some reason, because, yeah, not many films are interested in showing that, you know, and he doesn't make it more than what it is. But it's the minutia of daily life. It's so wonderfully detailed. I relish all those little pieces, like the cigarette lighter, like the hands moving over the radio dial, like the lizard, tracking the lizard running over the dirt. It's just filled with all these just lovely, just well-attended details that make it so rich, so beautiful.
Greg, this is not a religious film. Religion or God really don't appear in the movie, which might be a little bit odd since Mexico is a very Catholic country. There's a moment when the grandmother, who's kind of in a desperate situation with Cleo, not knowing what to do, simply begins reciting the rosary, but that's it. Cuarón passes on. So religion is not a factor in this movie. Yet there does seem to be, at least to me, something, transcendental, something spiritual about it. I'm not a big fan about that word. Maybe enchantment's a good word. The feeling that the world is an enchanted place, or at least there's something enchanting about it. Is this a movie, Greg, about something more than what's going on the screen, if that makes sense?
It is the thing that we're kind of hitting on, this overarching style, that camera work, the plain stripped down quality of the beautiful images is something that kind of expresses, it's kind of like ironic, because by showing things plainly, more simply, with fewer cuts, with longer takes, it's showing something other, it's showing kind of like the deep hidden meaning that lies at the core, I think, of existence, of everyone's life. I think it's a movie that transcends the kind of the literalness of its world and kind of goes somewhere deeper, and you feel that. It's kind of that feeling of when the movie washes over you and you feel like taking a deep breath because you've experienced something down to earth, and yet something maybe ineffable, something that you can't quite articulate, something that's beyond the veil or something. I don't know. I think that's part of it. The how patient and how willing he is to make you sit in a single moment. He forces you to take it in. And I think that reminds you that this is the way that human perception is more like what you see in Roma than what you see in typical Hollywood movies. We're constrained to our one perspective of ourselves and our eyes, and when we look at things, we tend to see them slowly.
Is there a plot to this movie, or does Cuarón more want to entertain a theme? How would you say? What is this movie about?
Well, I do think it has a plot, though it's perhaps not that plot driven, meaning that the kind of the lyric moments, those moments of intense kind of feeling and emotion, are far more important than the actual narrative, the things that happen. To me, it does have a plot, and that plot is important, but it's pretty simple, and you could write the plot in one sentence, you know. Mm-hmm. It's about a woman named Cleo who's a servant who gets pregnant. You know, that's kind of the plot of the movie. But, you know, it has a plot, but it's not that important. The plot is just in service to creating and expanding upon these lyric moments that actually want to show you something about life. they're instructive for how you should look at things, how you might look at things. And yeah, I think that's just, the movie's much more interested in that.
One theme, it seems to me, is that this movie wants to talk about family. The action of the movie is put into motion when the father leaves his family for another woman, which causes everyone left to have to say, now what are we going to do? And that leads me to ask you, or point you in another direction. In this movie, males, don't fare well. We don't see any men that might be considered admirable in this movie, yet I don't sense the movie has any feminist axe to grind.
I agree that it doesn't have a feminist axe to grind, because I think everything in the movie is so subtle and so delicately handled. But I think you're absolutely right in noticing that, you know, we pretty much have two old, like, grown men characters, and one is the father of the household who has an affair and leaves the family and basically abandons his children. So that's one example. The other male example that we have is the man that Cleo has a relationship with, and he does the same thing. He abandons Cleo once he finds out that she's pregnant. So our two kind of male, characters are portrayed pretty poorly, and I think I don't know if it's too much to say that this is common in this culture of the times. That might be reading too much into it, but I think the movie is really interested in showing the strength of female characters.
Yeah. One way I said it to a friend of mine is, I think that this movie, you might think of one theme of this movie as the plight of women, kind of in the ancient classical sense, the sense that women throughout history seem to bear a kind of burden that is often the result of the actions of men.
I was going to say, there's one kind of line of dialogue that I remember from the movie that I think, speaks to this idea of strong female characters, and it's the mother. And there's a scene where the mother comes home. It's clear that she's probably been drinking, because when she pulls the car into the garage, she scratches up. This is the father's car, so it feels kind of like vengeance against the car and against the father by she's scratching it up. And when she gets out of the car, Cleo is standing there watching her, and she says something along the lines of, no matter what they say, we're always alone in this life, Cleo. That's says, like, women are always alone or on our own or something like that.
Yeah, I forgot that line.
The emotional center is kind of the driving narratives are caused by women who have been let down by men, pretty like matter-of-factly.
Earlier, we were talking about the incredible number of shots or photographs that Cuarón assembles for us. I want to talk about the very last shot of the movie. Again, it's remarkable for where he puts the camera and then how he just lets it run without cutting. It's after the climax, and Cleo and the family have returned to stability. They have passed through the trial of disorientation to reorientation, as one man says it. And Cleo clearly is now a part of the family in a way that she wasn't before. Yet she remains a servant. They do not have her at the dinner table with them. She remains and retains her place as a domestic. In the last shot of the movie, the camera is very low again, and it is looking at the courtyard between her living quarters and the family's, and she enters the scene coming out of her door on the left. She crosses the courtyard and goes into the family's quarters, but the camera stays still on the courtyard. We get to look at that. And we hear talking, and then after a bit, Cleo comes out, and she has a basket of clothes in her hands. It's the family's laundry. And then we watch her begin to climb the iron stairway up the side of the building. Above the courtyard, it zigzags back and forth, sort of like a fire escape stairway. And she is climbing and carrying the basket, going higher. And the only movement of the camera is to just gently tilt upwards so we can follow her. And we watch her all the way to the top, where she's just a very small figure now. And then she steps off onto the roof, where we know she will hang the laundry out, and she vanishes from our sight. And we're left looking at the sky and some clouds and the passing of the mysterious jet that has appeared twice before in the movie. We haven't talked about that. The first time we saw it was in the very first shot as a reflection in the water. And the way I interpret that scene, Greg, is that we are watching her ascend into the sky, into heaven. Something like Mary, though we are never led to think of her that way. Yet I see her there as the humble servant who ascends to God, who will be exalted. What do you think of that?
Yes, that last shot is absolutely one of Ascension, and I think it casts her in heroic terms. I think at the end, because of her heroic deed, she's saved the family, saved some of the children, and the final shot. Yeah, I don't think there's two. I think Cuarón is wanting us to interpret as a sign of her kind of going towards the sky. Something has changed for her. She seems to be. Cleo is certainly in a different place at the end of the movie than in which we started.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I hadn't thought too much about that. How would you describe the new place that she has arrived at?
Well, I think she's got a greater understanding of the world. She's been through a very common human experience, and that's one of romantic heartbreak and also pregnancy. And I think over the course of that, she comes out at the end. She's more fully. I don't know. What would you say? I think she has a better sense of who she is. I think that's implied by seeing her walk up the stairs in that way and casting the camera's final gaze at the sky, that there is a whole life ahead of Cleo. And now maybe she is more prepared to take on the world or to deal with life. She knows that life can be cruel.
Yes, that's lovely. And she's loved, and she knows she's loved, and is connected to the gravity of that family, even though there are strict class boundaries still.
I love that, yeah. That's an excellent way of reading it, because I absolutely believe that, because they also, the trip that precedes the climax or that leads up to it is that the family goes on vacation, and Cleo gets invited, but the mother is careful to say, but you can't make her work. So she's not coming as a servant per se, but she's coming as a member of the family.
Greg, we like this film. Why do we recommend it to people? What do we want to say? Why should people see Roma?
Oh, I want to say, gosh, it's just such a... Well, I mean, we're beating a dead horse here by calling it beautiful, but I mean, that's just what it is. It's such a beautifully composed movie, and it, I think, is really, really refreshing to see a movie like this get made and do really well in 2018, 2019, when a movie like this that is patient, that deals with events of real life, it runs against the grain of so much contemporary cinema. So I think when a movie comes along like this and gets recognized and wins awards, it's just great validation for movies and art that can be contemplative, that doesn't have to be cynical. Because I think the cynical attitude is like one of the dominant kind of attitudes in the things that we watch.
Yes. And so one thing we definitely agree on, that people should go see this movie because it gives pleasure through beauty. And that by itself, beauty, is salutary. It's health-giving. It's life-giving. And I think, Greg, I want to add one other thing, and you can see what you think of this. I think this film also wants us to look at this young woman and say, there is a servant. She is not someone high in the hierarchy or esteemed by our society, yet she is worthy of our admiration. Like many servants, or serving people around us are worthy of our admiration. She's humble, she's sincere and real and beautiful for all those reasons. And I think one thing this movie is saying, that's worthy of our consideration.
Oh, I love that. That's so good. Yeah, I think there is she is the protagonist, and she's valorized, and she's a hero. And in this day and age, when who are heroes? They're often, super comic or comic book figures, superheroes. But there's something about like serving, being in the act of service to your fellow human beings. That's truly heroic. The movie reminds us of that we are connected in so many awesome ways.
Greg Emilio and the hero who serves, the very definition of a small good thing. If this is your first time listening to this podcast, thanks. You can go to asmallgoodthing.org to find other episodes. I'm Steve Zelt.